You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Chris,
Jeff,
it's a big day.
it's Friday.
That's right.
It's Friday.
It's the day after New Year's.
Is it?
Yeah.
I thought that was 2 days ago.
That's what I said. It's the day after New Year's.
Oh, I thought you were like stumbling.
Yeah.
I thought you were stumbling in your thought process.
It's the day after New Year's.
Hey, so when we get to Monday, it'll be the day after 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 New Year's.
Yeah, very, very much. This is our poor listeners. 365 more of those.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So, anyways, the reason why I wanted to highlight that is not only is it the day after New Year's, but it's also the most important day of the week.
Yeah.
Because it's the first one of the year.
First one of the year.
We're kicking off the year with What Made Chris Mad This Week.
Dun, dun, dun.
The most important segment we do.
Yes, it's very important. People must log this away in their brains.
So what made Chris mad?
Well,
this past
I have to tell you, Jeff, it happened yesterday. I have one ready to go.
Ooh.
So we're coming out of the Christmas season, right?
By the way, I've noticed most of the things that make you mad this week are very fresh.
Yeah,
you have a lot of things. I mean, it's always fresh wounds.
Well, you know what it is? People are just dumb, Jeff.
And that's what makes you mad this week. Okay.
There's just no shortage of dumb people.
Yeah, you're right. You
know. Mm-hmm. And by the way,
and you mean that with all the love you can muster in your heart.
By the way. The last time I shared what got Chris mad, I shared the guy with hanging the lights, right?
Yeah, right?
And I said something I didn't want to say.
Oh, yeah, don't say it again.
I'm not going to say it again.
Okay.
But remember I said, we should re-record that?
People eat your lunch over it.
And then you were like, oh, no. They loved it. They loved it.
Oh, did they? Okay.
I didn't have a single person that didn't come up to me and say, oh, you shouldn't have done that. They all came up and were like, oh, my gosh, that was so funny. But I felt so bad because I was in the church lobby after a service, and I got like 25 comments of people saying stuff. And, you sort of want to say, wow, that message that you just gave was really powerful. Right? No.
They wanted to talk about what made Chris mad.
I can't believe you said that about that guy. And I was like, okay, all right. Anyways. So here's the thing. We have no shortage of dumb people. We're coming out of the Christmas season. I made a significant purchase. Okay, it wasn't like over the top significant, but it was pretty significant, especially for me.
It was your biggest gift this year,
by far.
Yes.
And so what I discovered through the I'm trying to get non-specific here, but what I discovered is that the salesman sold me things that I did not need. Clearly,
he upsold you,
and so
which I mean, hey, the best salesmen are taught to upsell.
Yes,
upsell.
But looking back, it was all careless.
Ooh.
Like he sold me the wrong things, Jeff. So not only
did he upsell you stuff where it cost you more,
it
was the wrong stuff.
Things that did not work. Did not work. They
and he's
did not
laughing
fit
all the way to the bank. He got a Christmas bonus because of you.
Well, he did, because I know for a fact that the more you sell, the more you get in that particular job, right? So anyway, he's like, oh yeah, add this, and you can get this special little thing. It's so cool. It'll be like mounted and all this. So anyway, he sells me this mount that doesn't even work, didn't even check, and so basically, I look back and I thought to myself, I now know what he did, which was, and I hate to say it this way, but I do believe it, so I'm going to say it. He was not thinking of me in those moments. He was thinking of him.
Yes.
And so that made me mad. He had
a live whale on the hook, and he's reeling him in. That's all he did.
And now I have yet still, because I have 30 days, I have yet still to go back, and now I have to take this, this box that was opened, that was pulled apart, that is now taped shut, and it's like bulging because I can't fit everything back in the box, right? And I got, I couldn't even, so.
And that makes you mad all by itself.
Yes.
The fact that now it's another trip.
Yes.
And you're lugging this stuff.
Yes.
And now you're hoping they'll take it back.
And I'm almost positive he won't get a deduction. He'll still get that sale, which makes me even more mad. But here's a flip side to this sharing, okay?
Okay.
Is that I have had a lot of sales jobs. And when I mean a lot, I mean a lot.
Yeah.
And I only got sales jobs in college, and I had just a tremendous amount of variety sales jobs, more than any one person should have. And I am guilty of doing what this man has done. I've done the same thing. In fact, when I was in almost every job.
So is this kind of a what goes around comes around?
It could be. I think what I'm doing is I'm humanizing.
Cathartic confession.
I'm humanizing this man. I'm humbling myself. I'm confessing, and I'm saying
Moments of Confession with Chris Sarbaugh.
I'm saying that what he has done that made me mad, I am definitely guilty of doing as a salesman.
In the past.
In the past. Oh, yeah, of course in the past. Yeah, a long time ago.
Far past.
Yeah, when I was a college kid.
Yes.
Right? And so I understand it like really well because I've done it. Mm-hmm. And now I feel extra bad about the things that I did to people now that I'm on the receiving end of it.
Oh, well, so you learned.
Well,
53. Old dogs can learn their tricks.
That's right. So anyway, I've done the same thing. I remember one time there was an older woman who I knew very well as a part of my church, and I was working at selling used cars. I actually quit the job at that church, went to another church, quit that job, and then worked at this place selling used vehicles before I moved to Michigan. And so I worked there for like 9 months. I was selling used cars. And I know that the lady from my first church, she was like literally like 80 something years old. And she's like, yeah, I want this car. And I'm like, oh, here's all the extras you want. And I gave her so many extras that she didn't need it. And I knew she didn't need it. And she called me back up and said, I don't need this side step. She's like, it's actually in the way getting into this car. It's not high off the ground. I have this side step. It's too low. I can't believe you sold me this side step. Oh, I don't know what to tell you. Go back in and try to get your money back. But I knew she didn't need that. I knew it. But it was a lot of money for me.
Well, there you go.
I feel bad.
So
even saying it, Miss Peggy Brown.
So what do we do? Those of us that are uninformed consumers, what should we do when people are upselling us?
Probably just assume that the salesman doesn't necessarily have your best interest at heart, which means guess who's the person to trust the most when you're buying something? It's yourself.
It's you. Yeah. Do you buy the warranties and stuff? Extra warranties?
No, I almost never do.
Yeah.
Because the manufacturing warranty covers most of what you're going to need. And I've learned over the years that they make a tremendous amount of money with
piles of money
with the extended warranties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like if you never buy an extended warranty, you're going to get ahead of the game.
Yes.
So at some point, you're going to get burned, and you have to buy you're going to have to pay for something. But over the life of all of the opportunities at Home Depot and Walmart and
Best Buy
and all those places want to upsell you warranties, at a point, you're going to save money if you don't buy them all.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, good. Well, see, there you go. So learn it from the resident salesman scammer. Don't buy the warranties. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Thank you for calling me the resident salesman scammer.
The reformed. He's the reformed.
Gee whiz. Wow.
Yeah, okay.
All right, Ecclesiastes chapter 11. Oh, well, hey, speaking of people who, oh, dang it.
Do dumb things when they're young.
Oh, here you go.
We have some advice for the old.
I have it. Speaking of learning things when you're old, Solomon is about to give advice for both young and old.
There you go.
There you go.
That was the kind of transition I was going to do as well.
I just have to be better.
Good job,
I have to
Chris.
be better with
you made it.
Off the cuff.
You made it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to read Ecclesiastes chapter 11, and we're going to start off in verse 7. And here's what it says. Light is sweet, how pleasant to see a new day dawning. When people live to be very old, let them rejoice in every day of life. But let them also remember there will be many dark days. Everything still to come is meaningless. Well, thanks, Solomon. Young people, it's wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. Do everything you want to do. Take it all in. But remember that you must give an account to God for everything you do.
There it is.
So refuse to worry and keep your body healthy. But remember that youth with a whole life before you is meaningless. Again, thanks, Solomon.
Back and forth.
Don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator. Honor Him in your youth before you grow old and say, life is not pleasant anymore. Remember Him before the light of the sun, the moon, and the stars is dim to your old eyes, and rain clouds continually darken your sky. Remember Him before your legs, the guards of your house, start to tremble, and before your shoulders, the strong men stoop. Remember Him before your teeth, your few remaining servants stop grinding, and before your eyes, the women looking through the windows see dimly. Remember him before the door to life's opportunities is closed and the sound of work fades. Now you rise at the first chirping of the birds, but then all their sounds will grow faint. Remember him before you become fearful of falling and worry about danger in the streets, before your hair turns white like an almond tree in bloom and you drag along without energy like a dying grasshopper, and the caperberry no longer inspires sexual desire. Remember him before you near the grave, your everlasting home, when the mourners will weep at your funeral. Yes, remember your Creator now while you are young, before the silver cord of life snaps and the golden bowl is broken. Don't wait until the water jar is smashed at the spring and the pulley is broken at the well, for then the dust will return to the earth and the spirit will return to God who gave it. He is absolutely miserable writing this chapter.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's talking about remembering your Creator over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
So it talk about going back and forth. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. In verse number 9 through 11, just in those 9 and 10, he says, hey, do everything you want to do, take it all in, which sounds pretty careless. Yeah. But then he says, but remember, you must give an account to God for everything you do. You know what that reminds me of, by the way? Jamestown's motto. When they came and settled in the United States, do you know what Jamestown's motto was?
No.
It says, love God and do what you want.
Oh.
Isn't that wonderful?
Wow.
And so it says, love God and then do what you want. So if the prerequisite is loving God, then you'll want to do all the good things.
You'll do the right things.
You'll do the right things, right? So Jamestown's motto is wonderful, right? And I love it. And so it's almost like what he says is, he says the opposite. He says, do what you want, but remember, love God first.
Right. You're gonna give an account.
Which was great. And then he says, so refuse to worry, but remember that youth and the whole life before you is meaningless. Yeah. So he goes womp womp, and then he goes, oh, that's really, and then womp womp again. Yeah. And then he goes back and then says, but remember your Creator.
Yeah.
And now, do you still think that he is writing this meaning you're going to give an account to God in this life?
Yes.
Okay, you don't think it's past eternity?
Because he keeps flipping back and forth with the idea that when you obey God, good things happen in your life, or should, right? And I think this is purely that you give an account. So
while you're living,
judgment is coming in while you're living. Yeah, he doesn't seem to have any sense of eternity in his writings here. So I think about this. My dad, I can remember reading through Ecclesiastes with my family one time when I was a kid, and my dad grew up in a good Christian home. They went to they lived in Elba, Michigan. My dad grew up on a farm about 2 miles from the house I grew up in, right? Mm-hmm. So right around the corner, same community, small farming community. All of the families, there was only one church in the area. All the families went to this little Methodist church, like a block from my house. Right. Wow. So they all did. They'd all come in every Sunday. All the teenagers, all the parents, everybody, all the farmers, all the men would stand around and they would make plans for the next year, whatever, for the next season. All the women, it was always some kind of, Sunday dinner after church kind of a thing. They did it all the time. And they had a really good community. They worked together. They helped each other out. They bailed each other out, all those kinds of things. Everything that you can imagine a small, rural, tight-knit community would do. And so my dad grew up going to church, singing the songs, being a good boy. And he turns 18 and immediately leaves everything that has to do with Christianity. Now, his father died when he was a junior in high school. Fell over, had a heart attack out in the field, and just died. So part of that was there was a bitterness and an anger, and I'm going to just do what Solomon says. I'm going to live footloose and fancy-free while I'm alive because you don't live long. And he expected to die when he was 49, too. That was kind of his idea. So he went for so long not serving God. Then he marries my mom, and he was 40 when he came to faith in Christ. My grandmother said she prayed for my dad every single day for 40 years that he become a Christian.
It's incredible.
Every single day.
It's incredible.
And she lived on the property we lived. We had some acreage. We had a little tiny 800 square foot house. And then right behind, we had like a 600 square foot house right behind it. My grandmother lived in that little apartment, 1-bedroom little house. And so, she's only 100 feet from us. Mm-hmm. And so I was around my grandmother times sneaking snacks in the middle of the day. I go have lunch at my house and then go have lunch at my grandmother's house,
That's so
and whatever. She always had little butterscotches.
Yes, of course.
Always had butterscotches.
That's so funny. I think every grandma had butterscotches. that from our generation.
Yeah. And she always listened to Christian radio, singing Amazing Grace. She always be making something in the house. And she made all kinds, she canned a lot. So she's always canning peaches or canning, something. And she always had freezer jam from, the strawberries we grew. So go get a freezer jam sandwich, whatever. So anyways, I can remember my grandmother saying, I prayed every single day for your dad for 40 years. But I can remember my dad early on as a Christian. We read the Bible every morning and every night. I remember my dad would tear up sometimes when we would read passages like these. And he would say, I've wasted so much of my life. Because he thought he would die when he was 49. His dad did.
Right.
So he's like, hey, my people don't live very long. I didn't even give my life to Christ till I was 40.
And he's still living, right?
Yeah. He's 86 now.
Yeah.
So, I can remember in those days, in his 40s, and then as he went into his 50s, him feeling like he'd wasted his life. And so you know what he did? Instead of wallowing in the fact he wasted his life, his perspective on eternity was, I don't want to waste the last years of my life.
Right.
And so, man, my dad got on fire. He'd read through the entire Bible every year, at least once, sometimes twice a year. He was studying, he was learning, but he was also learning how to share his faith. I can remember my dad. I've seen my dad personally, lead 2 or 3 dozen people to Christ, strangers. That my dad just sit down. My mom's out shopping something. My dad's sitting at the mall, sit on the bench and just start sharing the gospel. Some guy leads some guy to Christ.
Wow.
I can remember going door to door. My dad would say, "Hey Jeff, let's go. We're gonna go Thursday nights. We go knock on doors and just say, hey, we're from the church that we went to in Flint, Michigan, and hey, if you died today, are you 100% sure you go to heaven?" I don't know if it's the most delicate way to do it, but my dad just wanted to lead people to Jesus.
Yeah, well, back then people were definitely more open to that.
And I've seen him share the gospel so many times. And then he was outrageously generous. And I grew up poor, but then my dad became pretty successful. He started a business, and he was very generous to the church, but he was generous to people who struggled and were poor. He did everything good. So now, my dad has been a believer longer than he wasn't.
Right. That's great.
So it's 40 years not being a believer, wasting his life. And he said, listen, I lived for the devil with all my heart. He said, I wasn't thinking about the devil. I was thinking about myself. He said, I lived for myself with all my heart for 40 years. So if God gives me 40 more, I'm going to give him everything I've got. And so I look at my dad's life now, and my brothers, we're all in ministry. We look at our dad and we go, that was a life well lived. Sure, he wasted a few years, but he got it right.
Yeah.
And so the difference between Solomon and my dad is Solomon, I don't believe, had an eternal view. And so I just wasted my life, and now I'm at the end, and I don't have anything. Whereas my dad saw, from this moment forward, I'm going to lay up treasures in heaven. I'm going to do everything I know to do. He became a holy man. He became a student of the Bible. He became a soul winner, sharing the gospel. He became generous, all those things. He raised his family well. And so I would say, if you're kind of reading Solomon and going, maybe I've wasted some time. Okay, while you're breathing breath, do what my dad did. Don't waste another minute. Right? Go after it. Go after it with all of your heart. As committed as you were to yourself or to living wrong, now become that committed to doing the best you can for as long as you can, as long as God lets you breathe breath.
Yeah, and I love that, because there are so many people who, think about the church patterns that we read about. George Barnastats or whatever it is. It's like kids who get raised in church. Typically, not always. Typically, they'll sort of exit church when they're able to do it, when they can exercise their own free will, right? That's the typical pattern. And then when do they go back to church typically?
When they're raising kids.
When they're raising kids, right? So they have this window of life where, all these really important things happen, and then they go back for the sake of the kids. In fact, we just experienced our Christmas testimony video that way, right? Let's go back because of the kids, that kind of thing. It's so common.
Right.
And yet Solomon, think about what he's saying. He's like, don't wait. He's like, do it while you're young. Remember your Creator. Remember all these things. Don't wait until your hair grows white like an almond tree.
Right.
Don't wait until you can't stoop over. He's like, don't wait until later. Take advantage now. And I love the fact that he's talking about remembering your Creator.
Yeah.
And he gives all these scenarios. Remember Him. Remember Him. Remember Him. Because that's just great advice.
Yep. And if you're a young person listening, you don't have to.
Yep.
It's common, but you don't have to. As a matter of fact, most of the best leaders you and I know in ministry didn't go down that. Now, I'm not saying that they were perfect, but they didn't just throw it all away. Right. And so staying in it a long time, God then will raise you up to be a leader in ministry, whether you're in full-time ministry or serving in the church or whatever. You don't have to, and you can avoid a lot of that guilt and a lot of that brokenness. When Jesus tells the story of the prodigal son, the story is primarily about the prodigal son, but sometimes we could celebrate the older brother stayed home. Prodigal son got a ring, some clothes, some sandals, and a party, and his older brother got everything else. Right. Right. And that rich man, because that's how it worked. Because the prodigal son went and took half of everything. Right. And then wasted it. Right. And the older son stayed home. Right. And had everything that the father had left. Prodigal son got forgiveness and love, acceptance and honor. Yep. But the next day after the story got over, he worked for his brother. That's right. That's great. So sure, it's a beautiful picture, and God will forgive us and bring us back. But man, I celebrate that older brother. He needs to get a better attitude, and we all need better attitudes. But I celebrate the decision of the older brother as even more, right? So that there's this opportunity. So in the same way, we don't have to go off and waste our life and then have those regrets. And so if we can, like you said, I think you said yesterday, or was it today, that you said about Solomon, if we would, it was today, we need to take good wisdom from the people who came before us. And we see Solomon's mistakes. And he goes, I chased success and money and women, and I feel like I've wasted my life. Yeah. And so we need to learn, as young people, we need to learn from those people and go, I don't want that. Yeah, it reminds me of my wife's testimony. So I had the testimony of, I didn't really come to Christ until I was, almost 16 years old, and had this crazy family and crazy stories and things that I, walked away from and experienced. And then you hear my wife's story, and she's like, well, I accepted Christ when I was 5 at this little tiny church with some red windows, and I went down the aisle, and then I've been in church ever since. The end, right? I've loved God and served Him and been in church my whole life. And, and her parents are still married. And by the way, get this. So my family, you've heard all the dysfunction of my family, right? Just craziness. Her dad and mom were neighbors growing up. They started dating in kindergarten. It was a joke by their parents, right? Or elementary school, something like that, where it was sort of a joke. They were together, and they've never been apart. Wow. And then they dated, they get married, they bought their starter home before he went off to war. Okay. Wow. And then they're still in their starter home. Wow. They've lived in the same place, which is why I always make the joke, and I say, okay. I said, so they've been married like 65 years or something like this. And I said, he is grounded like the oak tree, and she is steady as the sun. Wow. That's the way it is. Isn't that's fantastic? Yeah. And then her story is like that too, right? Yeah. And then that's the older son story, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's something beautiful about that. So you don't have to go down the path Solomon went down. Right. And then as Christians, we know about eternity. We have we have hope in eternity. And so you're living for more than just this life. Right. And so because you know that you're living for more than just this life, you're laying up treasures in heaven, as Jesus said, and this life has an impact on eternity, then it gives you a different view. And so you don't have to go down the path that Solomon went. But if you're saying, I feel the same way, the fact that you're able to hear us talking, the fact that you can somehow function well enough in society to use some technology to listen means you still have some sanity. Right. You still have some physical ability. You have some. So then make sure that every day, the rest of your life, if it's 50 days or 500 days or 5,000 more days, every day, make it count from here on out. And this is what Solomon didn't seem to figure out until the very end. He's going to say it. He's going to say it at the very end of this book, but I'm getting ahead of it just a little bit and saying, make every day count now. It doesn't have to be the way that he's looking at it. Yep. So as you go into 2025, as we lean in, this can be your best year. Yep. Titanic. Yeah. Make it count. Make it count. That's right. That's exactly right. Hey, that's all the time we have that's all the time we have. So hopefully we'll see you on Monday on the Bible Guys.